The MA lectures next year, which will be the continuation, it will be similar, slightly different, but similar. The first semester will be basically Hegel, Adorno, and Introduction to Heidegger, Hegel, Kierkegaard, Adorno, and then sort of Introduction to Heidegger moves in that. And then the second semester will be, there's a call for having Nietzsche on the agenda, so we might start off with Nietzsche and move forward and think through genealogies, and then get into Guattari and Foucault and that crowd. So if you want to listen to any of that, that's going to be on Tuesdays, but during the day. It's going to be from 3:30 to 5. Is that right? No, it's going to be from 2:30 to 5. Yeah, 2:30 to 5 on Tuesdays. Which means that Tuesday evenings will be research and practice, and Wednesday evenings will be whatever they'll be. Hopefully we'll have speakers. And also, if you can come up with names of people that you would like. I mean, I think it was a little bit crazy this year, at least for me. We started off with this thing called the Rep, if you recall, and I was working sort of 24/7 on that. And then that was put to bed, and I was so grateful because I thought, okay, great, now I can just get back to my work and just deal with you guys and know. Then we had the AHRC thing. So then that was the tickle. And then that ended at the end of January, and I thought, great, now I can just sort of do things. And then a whole regime change came into the university. Anyway, so hopefully all the seas will have calmed, the water will stop turning to oil, boiling oil, and people stop, they'll start learning the fair use of knives and things like that, stop typing. Anyway, so it should technically be a little bit better. I'd also like to set up formal days, probably they'll be on a Thursday, but for those of you that really can't come in on the Thursday, we'll come up with something else, to have formal PhD, not seminars, but one-to-one tutorials. So anyone that I'm on a first or second committee for, I need to see you probably, well, if I'm your first supervisor, I'd like to see you every 2 weeks, and if I'm your second supervisor, at least once a month. So it's as simple as that, and we just have to try and stick to it, and I really want to get that firmed up because I feel like I wasn't able to give you proper supervision. I was annoyed about that. The other thing to bear in mind is you think of any money that needs to be spent on books, or rather put slightly differently, any way in which, hello. Aha! Yes, that, you know how to make an entrance. Okay, good. Okay, let's just pull this aside. It's all right, didn't need a head. You okay? Would you like to sit here? And not at the... Oh, and plates? Excellent. And strawberries as well. Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. Wow. Everybody has come up with fantastic celebration food for celebration vibes. That's right. It's divine.
I'm going to eat lots of it. I'm always hungry.
I don't believe that.
Just because of that.
Because
it's...
You just don't eat. That might be connected. Okay. Did anybody bring things to drink?
I thought about that, but I don't know.
Well, we do have some water. I just want these cups. Does anybody want some water?
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Okay. Do we have a knife? Or can we cut it with a fork, maybe? Is there any gluten in that? There's gluten in that.
Oh, it's nice.
No. Oh, good.
Amazing. Cheesecake.
Very good.
Yeah. Plan, do you say plan?
Plan, I don't know.
So plan is the word
Yeah.
in English now.
Maybe next year.
In English is pudding. Something pudding.
Nee, het is plan.
Right.
Looks kind of like that.
Wow, well done. Who wants the first piece? Yeah. Or Oscar, yes? Sorry. We'll eventually get to the
I'm
second.
multitasking. Okay. Go with it.
So it's going to be
Oh, okay, okay.
That needs to take it.
Thank you. So what we were saying is that we will be meeting, this is our last day for today. Next year, next year we will start October 1st. It'll be from 3:30 to 6:30, and we'll carve that in stone. And we will probably have to hold it off campus so that nobody interrupts us, okay? Stuff like that. But anyway, we'll figure it all out.
3:30 to 6:30 on Wednesday.
On Wednesdays. Yeah, and we're gonna start the first term reading Foucault
I will, but okay.
and
Alright, thank you.
Some Habermas. This one,
Otherwise, isn't that snuck in there?
on the pragmatics of social. You're not eating either. It's poison. Thank you very much. I just have 2 slices.
Strawberry? Strawberry?
No. Oh, you want
Strawberry?
Did you want strawberry? All right.
Nobody wants your strawberry.
Mm.
Don't worry, I'll eat that.
Mm.
No strawberry.
Excellent. Well done. Thank you for doing that, Emily. Now, I'd also like to say that next year, the AHRC is running again. Those of you that applied last year and didn't get it, I want you to apply again. This time, we will work day and night, starting now, on the thing. Those are you two. Anybody else who wants to apply for the AHRC, if you want to, don't hold back. The application is going to be due in at the end of, when was it due the last time? End of December? 10th of January, 6th of January, 10th of January, something like that. Word on the street is that they're going to try and limit the program. So I have a feeling that next year, and possibly the year after, is going to be the last.
That's something different that they said to us.
Yeah.
They said they wanted to time.
Yeah. Hello? Hi. No, I'm in the middle of a seminar. Yeah, can they, is it this person who's speaking today? Okay, I think I know who that is, but anyway, I can't talk right now because I'm in the middle of a seminar. Thanks a lot. Okay, bye. Okay. So please, if you're interested in the AHRC, it takes a lot of work to figure out how to get it. And they are very, I don't know what the right word is, picky or something. Peculiar. Yeah. So please, and don't get despondent if they don't pick you, because it's really, they're looking for very specific kind of things. We either hit it on the nail or we don't hit it on the nail. So we're one of those kind of things. The other thing I wanted to announce is that we have a project going on called the School of Art Windows Project, which was basically a discussion that we had around asking people that we knew were doing sort of openly visual scenarios. And Joe Longhurst organized this, and the person who won the thing, it wasn't really a competition, because it wasn't really an open competition in a certain sense. We just went around asking people, is it okay? Well, it was Stuart Bugridge. So his work is going to be the first that actually sets up the way that we're going to understand the windows. This basically came out of the fact that every morning I would come from my apartment down the Eden alleyway and look at the windows of the School of Art and think, really? Like, how can this be a School of Art? It looks like a junkyard. So there was born the idea that maybe we could put something in the windows. And so I went around asking major artists I knew, would you be willing to do that? I felt like, would you be willing to do that? No. How much you paying? Nothing. It's like, I don't want to, like this kind of thing. So eventually I rethought it and thought, okay, it has to just be, we'll just ask the staff to do it. Okay, so you can see we kept going down the food chain until finally bounce back. Yeah, right. Well said. Anyway, so then Joe and Stuart kind of came up with the idea that we would have the building tell us what it wanted by trying to get the windows to kind of reflect or mirror or somehow express the kind of history and materiality of the building. So the project that you put together was basically the project you've been working on forever. It'll be up for about anywhere between a year and 18 months, which will give everybody else plenty of time to figure out what they're going to do, and then it'll be open as a competition. So every 18 months or so, either a year if we get the money, or every 18 months if we don't, or in fact, it'll never get the money, learn to live with these windows, we'll open up a competition. I think it's exciting, actually. And they look really weird, actually, when you come with, I made Stuart explain it 15 times.
It was Joe let through.
That's right. What about,
She did a
why
good
is that
job.
happening? I don't understand that. In my usual, very calm, reflective way. Anyway, so that's happening, so don't be alarmed when you see the windows being changed. And that will be up by the MA show, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the.
Okay, that's the plan.
As long as the company don't go on holiday, I've got to bring them a check.
Okay,
They
good.
then close down for August.
That's the plan. Okay, so that's the plan. And as we also know, the conference is happening today. The conference is happening.
Oh yeah, another idea.
That was a joke, everybody. The conference is happening 26th and 27th of June, and I think I found a venue to hold the dinner. Because Bar 1 is going to get back to me or you, Grace, to say whether or not they can do it. If they can't do it, Coates, the place that I always send everybody for coffees and stuff, they're willing to close it down, give it to us for free, staff it themselves, but the key would be that they'd only have beer and wine. And food. Would you be opposed to that, or would you want hard liquor?
Oh no.
No,
Yeah,
that's
mine is
good.
fine.
Would you rather it there, or would you rather it in Bar 1?
Where is it?
Coates, C-O-T-E-S.
Oh.
It's
The one
around
on
the, it's around the corner, yeah, or whatever, some corner. It's around that corner down. You know where Bar 1 is. If you just cross the street and walk slightly further up, just a little bit. Would you like it there?
Yeah, I don't see
Would
a
you
problem.
prefer it there? That's actually what I'm asking.
It might be the cheapest option.
It'd be nice.
Yeah. In a good
I
way.
think it'd be nicer too, because A, they're friendly. That was Lauren's
Little
position.
bar you-
Yeah, well, it is a bar. Yeah,
And
yeah,
if you get it to yourselves, that's good.
yeah. We get it all to ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be a lot of fun actually, and I
What
want it nearby. So
What night's that? Is that on the Friday?
that's on the Thursday night.
On the Thursday.
Yeah. Thank you very much for sharing all that stuff. That's really fun. Okay. Are we, any other things you would like to announce? Oh yeah, then today at 4, Matthias Vigener is coming in, so our seminar is going to not be very long, you can tell. Sorry about that. But I figure that we will have this as an ongoing conversation via emails, or if you want to do mad videos over the summer and share them with each other. I usually run a philosophy salon in London. We used to do it every Monday night. I don't know what we'll do. We haven't figured it out yet. But we're going to be looking at the Piketty book in Capital. So you're welcome to, come down to London and do that. There's a bar that we always meet at called the Crooked Well. Although they've now gone very posh upstairs. It used to be a complete dump, but now it's turned into, it's so annoying. Yeah, the philosophers and artists come in and, they ruin everything. Now it's very gentrified. But if not, we can do somewhere else. But I'm going to try and set up the Piketty discussion because I think that it's crucial that people take a look at that book. Okay, that's my news. Anything else? Okay, we're gonna jump into the depths of Kant. Do you know that, you know Frank Cunningham, who is a wonderful human being, and came to talk on Benjamin's Arcades. He wanted to do a film on Kant. He always asked he begged his students to do like anything you ever want to know about Kant or everything you ever want to know about Kant, or, you know, because he thought Kant was the funniest guy. I mean, again, this will happen to you if you keep reading Kant. You will also find it hilarious. Anyway, no one ever did, much to his horror, because he didn't really have artists in the group. He had hardcore, mainly analytic philosophers. So they had issues with Kant, as you can imagine. Now, where have we gotten with the Kantian dilemma? As you know, I tried the approach of not giving lectures, and last week I gave sort of a half lecture. I'm not sure which worked better or worse, but we were going to go back to the fundamentals, to the Groundwork, and we're going to sort of couple that with this question of the sublime, the beautiful and the sublime. But I'm wondering, where are we on this? Do you need another synopsis? Shall we just kick in? I'm not going to lose the back row, am I? So the back row's in for the long haul, okay, right? Or Grace is gone. Forget it, not here. Who wants to, anybody want to sort of give, what is it that is, what is living and what is dead in Kant? Okay, Mattia. Sadly, your eye met my eye, and that was quite sad.
What I really like in Kant is the notion of transcendental,
Okay, and how do you understand that?
which is, 2 weeks ago we discussed it a bit. It differs from what is transcendent, as in, it differs from the transcendent because it is open. The transcendental does, in lay word, does the same job of the transcendent, but it's not absolute as the transcendent is.
When you say the same job, you mean that the transcendental does what? This kind of
Offers a
transformation?
ground.
It offers a ground, and what type of ground does the...
Well, it's a ground that we could call, with later definitions, a groundless ground in an Heideggerian way. Because for the notion of space and time, which we write in the aesthetic of the critique of realism, space and time work as dimensions for us to know the world. They are not dimensions of the world. The world is beyond the reach of what we know. What we know is already a packaged, not a synthesis, but a packaged mix of some sort of raw data that is beyond our grasp,
Okay.
and our system, our mode of knowing it.
Okay, so let's start this way. Let me ask you this. If you had to talk about this for everybody, if you want to talk about a system, what is the usefulness of a system? Before we get to the transcendental, because I think we have to start a little bit smaller, a little bit further back. What is why does one think about things in terms of systems?
So to orient yourself and then to use the system,
Okay, and where are you in relation to the system?
it can vary depending on the system.
Good answer. Okay, it does vary depending on the system. So, or it does vary depending on the kind of epistemological way in that you're using. So, if we're using a, let's see, if we're using a Heraclitean system, dialectics, the toe in the water thing, where is the person in relationship to the notion of motion, notion of movement? Where's the subject in relation to what?
Outside.
Outside, good. So this is a journey to figure out how the outside and the inside met. Kind of like how Harry and Sally met, whatever that story is. How the inside and the outside met. Some argue they can never meet. Some argue they can never meet because they don't exist. Some argue that they can only meet, and they only meet in the simulacra. Some argue that they can meet, but they can only meet in the transcendental groundless ground. Inside, outside. Now, these words, inside, outside, are lay terminology. By lay, I mean if you used it in a PhD exam, you would not pass. Okay, that's what I mean by the word lay here. But I'm using this to orient you so that you can then eventually throw away your shovel and pail and actually run into the water. Sorry. We're at a thing called a sand pit. Has anybody ever heard of a sand pit?
No.
I mean a sand pit for research. Okay, sorry, that's what I meant. It's hilarious. A sand pit for when you get to grow up and be, tortured by having a job in academia, if you ever go in that way, you will be expected to get grants. The way you're expected to get grants is that you have to either know the language, but a lot of us around the table don't know that, or you have to go to a thing called a sand pit. And a sand pit is where people from all over the place take a look at you, and you take a look at them, and you all realize you're fighting this together, and eventually the same vocabulary emerges, and the same problems emerge. And they talk about having your shovel and your pail, and your sand, and building sandcastles. You just want to throw yourself out the window, while you're in these meetings. But anyway, I digress. I was in one yesterday for 3 hours. Now, the usefulness of the sand pit is kind of like the usefulness of using lay terms. So I'm going to use these as kind of like markers so you get a sense. Inside, outside. Where is the inside, philosophically speaking? What would be referenced as inside? A, your stomach. B, your mind. C, your toe.
Mind.
Good. Thank you, Grace. Okay, so a lot of times when people talk about the inside, what they mean by this is consciousness, thinking, I don't know, feeling, smelling, things that are kind of like, quote, not material, but not material. So kind of im-material, which is always complicated because immaterial tends to mean, when you put the words together, not material. Like it's not happening, it's not important. So anyway, so inside tends to mean mind, or tends to mean ephemeral. Whereas outside, what would be, if the inside is the mind and the ego and the superego and the sexual, and this is all the inside bits, which we know is completely wrong, what's the outside? What would be an outside example?
Reality.
Reality, yeah. So reality would be outside. You'd go join reality, right? You'd go out your front door and go, okay, going to reality, right? That's the outside. And the outside can be anything from going outside your front door to waking up in the morning and not being asleep. It could be being awake to actually moving outside of the body. So the body tends to act as a barrier between inside and outside. Now, I'm saying this in really simple terms because these terms sneak back in complicated writings. And even though these are wrong, even though they're not correct, they will come back and haunt you because somehow it's like plastic with a memory. You just get melted down after months and years of having these PhD seminars, and the millisecond you leave is like right back up to inside, outside, yes, no, black, white, truth, false. Okay, so try and find the little fake friend. What do they call them? False friends. You ever study another language and they have false friends that sound like something but they're really not? This is a false friend, the lay stuff. But it can't. You don't know what I'm talking about.
No.
Okay. Anybody want to explain a false friend?
Those are mean, isn't it? It's when, yeah, when a word in another
Like,
language.
say, in French.
Yeah. It's, can't think of
Yeah, I can't think of one either. Anybody think of
But
a
it
false
looks,
friend?
it looks and sounds like an English word.
Yeah, but it just
means
isn't.
something completely
Sensitive and sensible.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's right. Sensitive and in fact, that word is always mixed up when you're first learning the language. To be sensible, it's because in Spanish it's sensible, which is sensitive, but sensible in English means to be, has nothing to do with being sensitive. It means actually being practical. Often, it doesn't mean that you're able to sense something. Right? It's false friend. Okay, so we're gonna
Does conscious in French mean consciousness? I mean, it looks like conscious, but it means consciousness in French.
It might. Does anybody speak French?
Yeah, speak French. Say it
Conscious.
again.
Conscience.
Conscience. What looks like conscience
Yeah,
means consciousness.
yeah, that's true. That's another.
That's another
Yeah.
false friend.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of false friends around. Remember that. Okay, lay terms are fantastic false friends, but they don't pretend to be friends. They just are wrong most of the time. Sometimes they're all right, but they're so ingrained in one's way of thinking and doing and being that it's not difficult to go right back to your old ways of inside, outside, yes, no, black, white, so on and so forth. Okay, so the first thing to identify in your own vocabulary, in your own way of dealing with thinking and doing stuff is, what are your false friends? What are your lay friends? By lay friends, I don't mean anything other than false friends, okay? So all of you with the mind of the gutter, we will go somewhere else, okay? No, that's all right. Gutter minds are welcome here. Okay, now this notion of the lay friend as the false friend, as the thing that seems like it's saying something that really isn't, you can always use that in your work to create the paradox. A paradoxical argument is a very useful argument. You don't have to worry about whether or not you're solving an argument. You simply have to worry that the argument has its various dimensions that you're pointing out. Okay, now having said that, so the inside often means thinking, spirit, something like this, consciousness, and as a result, it tends to also get linked to the notion of the subject. Because the notion of the subject, which is variable, ephemeral, lighter somehow, seems not to have to carry the weight of the tied to the ground notion that objectivity holds. So the lay sense of external tends to be linked with the lay notion of objective. So I can say, that this thing, this paper with a toothpick inside of it, so I said, oops, inside of it. Okay, this thing is actually is paper, it's got a toothpick inside of it. This is the objective reality, we can see it, we can drop it, it does things, it operates physically, it has a quote, real presence. And so as a result, you have a lot of philosophers you're going to come across talking about things like the real. And then there's people that talk about the really real. Have you seen that yet?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can you remember who talks about the really
I don't
real?
know, there was something.
Yeah?
This is like really real.
The really real. Now the really real, it's gone out of my head, that's why I can't think of it. The people who talk about the really real are trying to move one back into breaking away from this objective being outside reality and subjective being inside reality, and the really real doesn't deal with those terms. The really real deals with, I don't know, someone punched you in the face and that's really real. Okay, or, so the really, and then there's another whole group of people, they tend to be part of the sociologist group following Maus and the Gift, They talk about the really real world, as opposed to just this thing called the real world, which is, again, the real world would be like the external reality, and the really real world would be what really happens, and we're outside of theory. It's sort of an anti-intellectual position. But anyway. And then you have the really non-real world, the really real supernatural world. And these are people that you've been dealing with in your work, I would think, and a lot of people along those lines that say it does exist. There's no way to argue against or for, because it's just the position. This is the position. It's an objective reality that the really real, in whatever form, actually exists. So the notion of actually, the notion of existence, is all part of this thing called the external. And then it becomes fun, because then the internal gets to transgress into the external, or the external gets to transgress into the internal, and there's layers of philosophy, layers of arguments about this, and this is basically what Kant is trying to get rid of. He's trying to get rid of this whole inside, outside, really real, not really real, go out into the world, do something, don't go out in the world, don't be part of the world scenario. And he's trying to make, at the same time, an argument of how an individual matters. Because it's a long time in the gestation, as it were, of this particular view of what is an individual, or what is a person, or what is a human. By which I don't mean as distinct from an animal, or whether or not a human has a thumb and has a brain, or what. But the idea of being human for this kind of group that falls into this characterization of the Enlightenment, is that a human being is someone who can think. By thinking is meant reasoning. By reasoning is meant coming up with a way of understanding systematic logics and deducing something from them. You can think A, B, and you can actually get to H, because you know that the system is a 24-letter system, and it takes you down the trail. And that's being human. The second thing about being human is that human beings move, require movement. It's all based on Newtonian physics. The third version of being human is that being human requires a relationship of sociality, of being social. And that if those three, and that sociality cannot be directed by the church or religion. That there has to be a separation between church and state. So the rise of the individual, that is the rise of reason, this notion that reason, which is in your mind, is no longer subjective, but objective. And what's objective about it is not just that it is able to calculate the outside. What's objective about it is that it's able to be systematic. That's what makes it objective. So if something can have a pattern, if something can be produced more than once, it can be objective. And that notion of objective is subjective objective. Because that notion of objective moves intrinsically. So the pattern doesn't have to be like a square with a frame, and then another square with a frame, and then another square with a frame. The pattern can be some sort of camouflage pattern that can be repeated. So Kant is speaking about this, and he then wants to give that a way that you can distance yourself from the empiricist, from the rationalist, and from the dogmatic. Now, the empiricists. Do you remember what the empiricists are? Who they are? We have empiricists, we have Stoics, we have rationalists, we have Epicureans. Does anybody know what an Epicurean is? Oh, for heaven, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know because Epicureans have to do with what? Eating. Yeah, sorry. I meant that with love. Okay. Yeah. Bacchanalian. You know what the Bacchanalian group does?
A drink.
Good. Spoke like someone who knows those bacchanalians. And what did they drink with? Or with whom did they drink? And who were they that drank?
Well, the goddess, when it sort of bacchanal was like a sort of drinking orgy, really, like.
Yes, sort of. Yeah, and who primarily were involved in this orgy? A, men. B, women. C, centaurs. All the above. Good. But what's interesting about the Bacchanalian move was that women were absolutely central to this, and not from the point of view of being, really nice, lovely people, but wild, crazy, clothes off, running around, screaming their heads off, kind of thing, men and women. Okay, so what is the empiricist? Tamsin, you were going to say something about that?
Based on what's perceived.
Okay, and why would empirical, which tends in the lay sense to mean boring, dry, and factual, why would empiricism mean this perception thing? What's going on with that?
The rationalists were more to do with concepts that could predict.
Okay, right. And so the empiricist, what is it about the rationalist and where does the a priori come into either one of them?
The rationalists.
Okay.
It's provability.
It's what?
Provability.
And why does a priori allow a form of provability that perception doesn't allow?
Because it's based on mathematical and science.
Partly true. Where does experience come in? Who's the experience crowd? The empiricist. Okay, good. So empiricist, experience, E-words. Right. Rationalist, a priori. What were you going to say, Mattia? No? Okay. We're all on the same page here? Okay. Where does now the notion of the categorical imperative of the will come in?
Does it knit the two together?
It knits it together, but not in a knitted fashion. In what type of fashion? How does the will become the groundwork of the whole metaphysic? What's another word for that Matthias started off the seminar with?
Transcendental.
Yeah. So what's crucial here in the brilliant move of Kant is that he talks about a materiality that has a pulse, that has a will. That doesn't mean it has an intention. It means it has a drive, it has a force, it has energy. And that's wild. And that's why a lot of people from very different walks of life and from very different ways into the problem love Kant. It's also why he's hated. Because the idea that an immaterial something would have some kind of pulse, some kind of vitality to it, is strange. Because if something has a vitality to it, if something has a pulse to it, isn't it alive? And if it's not alive, is it undead? Because if it's not dead and it's not alive, where is it? So it starts getting creepy with Kant.
But the problem, I mean, to me, I don't know if one could trace it back to Aristotle. No, it's not important where it is coming from, but it's the idea that something, in order to be active, needs to have a body. That with Kant is finally articulated as not necessary.
Right. But what's interesting is that it's not a brain either.
No, because a brain is a body in itself.
Right, but well, I mean, but it's not consciousness.
It's not a mind either.
Good.
And it's fantastic because it could be language, it's economics, it's something that is not somewhere and yet exists, works, it is absolutely real. And its immaterial is in non-material, but
Mhm.
not irrelevant.
Okay.
And I find that very, very interesting as a starting point, because otherwise one keeps falling in the distribution of the world or the universe inside, outside, interior, exterior.
Mhm.
But instead, both parts play together into generating whatever present is.
So, let's say that's the case. So then the next question becomes, this thing called the ground, what would be a lay definition of ground? This is not a hard question. I'm going to ask you, Andre. because
Something that gives you a purpose.
Something gives you a purpose. What else? That's actually a little higher than the lay definition.
Not that low. Not that lay.
Yeah, something that, if I say ground, what immediately comes to mind? Okay, try not to be philosophers here.
Floor.
Basis, floor, you know, what's the color of the ground?
Brown.
Brown, let's say. You have no
Earth.
earth, there's ground, terracotta, ground, terra firma, again. So terra, ground, tends to be, quote, objective, because the idea that something can give you stability, because if you don't have a ground, it's going to be hard to walk on it. So the ground, the reason ground has such a central, or a reason ground has such a central feature, is because in lay sense, it gives you not just your purpose, it gives you your ability to stand up and do what all humans are supposed to do, which is move and do things, have experiences. So the ground becomes objective. And here's where the new fight happens. If the ground is objective, how come someone like Hegel can make the argument that is in fact subjective? Because for Hegel, as we know, the ground is precisely that synthesis that becomes the basis that allows for something to move. And not very far, because it's not moving like in a linear way, it's moving in a way that becomes fully what it is. So to become fully what something is, to become all that it can be and nothing extra and nothing less, become all that it is, to move in that way, it requires a ground. That ground is very different than the walking on the ground. So now you have a shift, and there's an argument that starts to develop yet again between objective and subjective, because the question keeps coming back, how do you know it's true? Not the question of how do you know you're not dreaming, not that question. You know, how do you know the tree fell in the forest and you're standing right in front of it, or even if you weren't in the forest, you know, it has nothing to do with the tree in the forest or whether you saw it or you didn't see it. The question is, how do you know that something is true? And we've gotten to a mad discussion, I don't remember this, a couple of weeks ago, about the moon, going to the moon. And some of you actually thought, someone sitting in this corner, won't be named, that it's possibly not true. Now, how do you know when something is true? How do you know how far back to go to make the argument? Hannah Arendt used to say that you can only go so far back, and then you just have to say, that's it, I'm just taking my stand. Because the far backness of something is always, for Hannah Arendt, political, which makes sense. So you get, you know, why is the sky blue? Again, eventually, remember, the why question always leads back to God. But for Hannah Arendt, you didn't have to go that far. You didn't have to go to God. You could just go that far, just stop. And if someone said, why are you stopping at that point? The answer for her is because I am stopping at that point, because now I can make the rest of my argument going forward. And my argument is based on a counterfactual, which is how a lot of people argue. You present something that isn't true, or is profoundly not true, and you can argue forward from it. So, that's a detail. So now the question is, the ground that you walk on, this thing called the objective ground, seems like an objective ground, and you're not going to fall through it, so you're not going to fall through the earth. I mean, unless something dramatic happens. But technically, you know, when you walk out that door, unless the building starts to fall apart, you're going to be able to walk out that door on the ground that has been there for the last 125 years. So, and you know that. That's not something that you're going to debate with yourself while you're sitting in here thinking, God, I really hope the ground is still there when I get outside. You're really thinking nothing. You're thinking, I'm going to go do something because I'm dying in here. Okay, so, you know, I have to take a shower. I have to, like, wake up or, you know, whatever. You have to do something. So the ground around which it will enable you to go somewhere else is objective. It doesn't change in the sense that it's stable. Not in the sense that it could be a ground, or it could be made out of dirt, or then it could be made out of tar, or a nice tile. It's not changeable at that level. At that level would be called, for some people, subjective. Subjective becomes the decoration for the objective. Now, yes?
So could I say
No.
the ground is ground?
Yeah? The ground is ground.
Could I say this ground is ground could be this untheorized, unarticulated, unproblematized backgrounds, cultural assumptions, and all everyday competencies that we kind of take untheorized, unarticulated, unproblematized, take for granted. So we say the ground is in that sense objective because it's that cultural horizon that we're moving in and don't necessarily have problems. We don't have to pick every word we say, every note, and put it under the
Microscope,
so,
yeah.
So
Yes,
could
and
I say
who would say that? Who would say that? Starts with an F. Foucault. That is literally Foucault. What? Yeah, well, that's why they have arguments.
That's not happy, huh?
Yeah, literally. That is exactly,
That's his enlightenment.
that's his discord, that's his notion of regimes of power.
So
Because-
you said it's also so you I didn't hear who you said it was also.
Habermas.
Oh right.
Habermas and Foucault, they're both interested in enlightenment. Both come
This is very different than the ground is ground we have seen in Heidegger.
Mhm.
I would almost, while Mark was describing it, I thought that that's what could be called ideology, the unquestioned reference frame that is accepted, not even decided as the example you made earlier, which I was thinking that that's also very much an artistic decision. I decided the frame of the work is, I decided it is transparent and what is opaque in my work. I decide when I finish having references between references, and then it becomes the thing as it is. It varies in various steps within one piece of work. Sorry, I need to check now. No, I thought it was
Well,
so it's not unquestioned as an ideological frame.
and the part of the response to that is yes. And there was a big argument, and it was sort of culminated, not argument isn't the right word, it was a big way of framing it, by a school that was closed down at the University of Birmingham called Cultural Studies. Now, the Birmingham School of Thought, or whatever they're called, the Birmingham School is really what it was known as, led by Stuart Hall and others, was in Birmingham at the university, and it made the largest environment type of school around, with that kind of argument around discourse, power, ideology, and it was just closed down about 3 or 4 years ago. And so the University of Birmingham decided those people that were still stalwarts of the Birmingham School were still, some of them were still there, and of course there's a big fight, because there's a very serious political fight around which the left is very much, you know, a certain form of the left was very much pushing that agenda. So they closed it down, and they just put together a conference on the Birmingham School, and of course Stuart Hall was going to be the keynote, and he died. And so this thing called the Birmingham School, was something that I came across. So that was, you know, everybody has their horizon that they come into when they're doing their PhD. Your horizon is really postmodernism, this fractal stuff, the Anna stuff. So that will always go with you. Psychoanalysis, that will be your kind of legacy, as it were, that you'll be playing around with. what I came in on was the Birmingham School. And Old and Foucault and that sort of crowd. So that was my kind of way in Gramsci, the Euro-communist, common sense. Now, Gramsci tried to argue that common sense, exactly what you're saying, which is this not thought through, but not in a negative way of saying not thought through. Just you're not thinking of it. It's not 100% rational. You don't do things that are 100% rational. For Gramsci's argument, which I particularly like that argument better than the Habermas argument anyway, is that there's no false consciousness. It doesn't help you to understand consciousness as either being true or false. It is just how it is. And it's not just how it is by accident, it's how it is by a very serious scenario of how cultures operate and how they connect. So, in answer to your question and then followed by yours, yes, it's ideology. Yes. And ideology is political. So at the base of ideology is the political. And the base of the political is a groundless ground, which then circles back to this whole argument between objectivity and subjectivity. This was all the Cloud-Muth stuff. This was all questions on hegemony. All of that starts coming into the frame.
I mentioned the fragment as well.
Yes.
In terms of ideology is a fragment among others.
Yeah.
A fragment is a word that I came with. Fragment to be.
Yeah, that's right. The fragment was very important.
Yeah, the fractal is become.
The fractal is now in use, but it was the fragment. Actually, and also the center, the subject, everybody thought they were going to lose their mind. Can you imagine having this kind of conversation every day that you'd meet for 10 years, because PhDs went on for that long. Every day you'd have a discussion on the subject versus the object. And really, even I wanted to throw myself off the curb, because it was just, honestly, we're not doing this again. There was always somebody banging on about either the object or the subject or both. And somebody then came out with a book called The Decentered Subject. And that just threw everybody into a tizzy, because no one had thought about the fact that a subject could be slightly off-center. So if the center of your world is subjectivity, but it's slightly off-center, so it's a decentered subject, that connected with a Kantian move of the radical autonomy of the state, of like an arm's length, a little bit of a shift over. So everybody was the decentered something. There was the decentered object, the decentered subject, the decentered this, the decentered that, again, throw off yourself on the curve. And eventually, this transpired into a totally different form of desire, identity. You had decentered identities. You had then the whole notion of male, female, and quote, in between. And then you had drag queens, drag kings, dragsters was another word, all these different, hermaphrodite, radical fairies, all of this kind of started coming out, literally coming out. And that was also fascinating. This is all part of this whole moment. And now I feel like we're circling back now to Kant and the questions of subject and object. God. Anyway, hopefully we get past that. Or not. Maybe that's where we end up. I don't know. But
Can I suggest Adorno's critical theory?
suggest Valium.
There's an essay.
What's it called?
In Critical Models.
Yeah.
Adorno's book, Critical Models. There's an essay in there just called Subject and Object.
Yeah.
And it is, I think, I did Adorno as my PhD, so I think it's really interesting. Basically, he says a subject it has a kind of priority, but it doesn't really exist, and it's really the movement that you make. That's the important thing. You try and articulate movement, try to articulate something in language, which is not conducive. So it's this kind of movement, play, backwards and forwards all the time. Which
Yeah,
is
brilliant.
but I recommend
Absolutely.
critical models.
And the thing about that position is, of course, it was the shorthand version of his negative dialectics, as you probably would know, you would have to know, but in the sense that this, do you remember back in September, October, when we started talking about negative dialectics, and we're talking about how the, if you had the thesis antithesis creates a synthesis, which comes back around and makes the ground, right? But if you turned it sideways, so you had thesis antithesis coming together like so, and the ground actually becomes this movement of the synthesis, not this movement, right? So it becomes this movement. Are you with me on this? So you have thesis. thesis, antithesis, they come together, they create the environment around which you can understand. This is a postcard of the British Library. Moment of silence. The really real British Library. Anyway, sorry. And that becomes the ground around which you understand these two sides. And Adorno basically was saying, no, you flip it this way. He doesn't literally say this, but if you understand this being the thesis, and this being the antithesis, and it produces its moment that comes back around and gives sort of meaning to this environment. This bit, this so-called coming back around, is the most important part. It's not whether it's the ground or the top or the bottom, as it were. It's this movement, because this movement is the negative dialectic. Well, that's shorthand version of how this becomes what it is. So Adorno becomes, for many, either the only one that really gets dialectics and is able to figure out how to make it work when no one else can, or he's at least the stepping stone to actually understanding this groundless ground, immaterial material scenario we're talking about. So it's and that the importance of discussing objects, subjects, so on and so forth, I hope I've explained enough that you get a sense of it, but it needed to get transcended, or needed to get rid of, you needed to get over it in a certain sense. Even Foucault would say, look, you can say that my work is subjective. In the interviews, he would say, my work is subjective, my work is objective. Actually, it's neither subjective nor objective. He didn't yet have the language, literally the conceptual language to talk about it in other than the ways in which he was doing it. I don't think that's why he couldn't come up with something. I think he was on another mission, coming up with something else. But he doesn't, in the end, as you'll see, talk about it in those terms. He rejects the notion of being called his work subjective. Though of the two, if it had to be objective versus subjective, he always goes to subjective. Have I completely lost you people, or what do you think? Yeah? Okay, so let's go. Let's try now. Open. Did anybody have a chance to really look at this again? Yeah? Okay. Now, groundwork of the metaphysics of morals. Why do you think this has something to do with morals? Or let's start again. Why do you think it has something to do with metaphysics? What is the metaphysic? What is it? In fact, it's not even a plural. It's a singular. What is a metaphysic? Don't answer that. Sure.
Now.
Anybody want to give it a rough kind of ready? What is metaphysics or metaphysic in the Kantian moment?
It is that which guarantees the certainty of knowledge.
What type of knowledge?
A rational knowledge.
A Russian knowledge.
No.
What did you say?
Rational.
Oh, rational. So you- God. Okay, sorry.
Or better, what is that which is rational knowledge? Because it's a method at this point, and no longer a certainty based on linearity between.
It's a method or a meta, do you say? Sorry,
Method,
M-E-T-H-O-D.
yes.
Yes, right, it's a method.
It's a method, and no longer a problem of what I know in the object, but how I know the object.
Right, okay. So, if you have this notion of the meta linked to the physics, which tends to mean experience, which tends to mean the experience of the everyday world, or anyway, a world, or the world, or the worlds of worlds, then this meta is standing in for a specific kind of methodology. And that methodology would be called what in Kant?
A priori.
That's a feature of the methodology. Not dogmatic as such, no. What would the methodology be called?
Practical.
Close.
Is it like the worm? Is it's not
And what's the will,
reason.
what's the will able to get beating, get throbbing, get vitalized?
The senses.
Starts with T. Now, I don't think you notice this plan.
Transcendental.
Yes! I have your paper. I actually stole that. Okay. So happy. Okay. Said that. Can you erase that? Anyway.
All right.
I didn't really steal it. Okay. Transcendental. Do you get that? Is it you're making a face because you got it because you didn't get it because you
No,
wanted
I get it.
Okay.
Yeah, transcendental.
it? Can you say it back?
Metaphysics in Groundwork creates transcendental form of knowledge, right?
Transcendent.
Transcendent.
Transcendental. Yeah. Transcendental. Sorry. Yes. And why is that linked to the moral? I mean, one of the things you're going to find out is you can see why people get so annoyed with people who throw out the notion of the transcendental because they think they're being immoral or amoral.
He links it very strongly to ethics,
Yeah, and
And
why?
the way
How
of-
does he do that? What's the point?
the way of being, the way of
Okay, and so what's the difference between an ethic and a moral for Kant? These are hard questions. I'm not trying to.
Could be because he's looking for something, the way we take decisions, why we take this decision,
Yeah.
and is there any universal law of how to take this decision correctly? And
Okay.
so link it to ethics and
Good. Okay, that's the start of it. Now, in the Piketty book, someone I ran into wanted it, so I gave away my copy, and I finally got another one just now. Here we go. Again, in the Piketty book, which is now being lambasted in the press. But anyway, in the book, one of the things he's arguing, which may or may not be true. I mean, I haven't finished reading the whole argument yet, but it does seem to be the case in real reality, which is that in today's economic political scenario, the autarkic moment is happening. That is to say, more and more wealth is concentrated in fewer and fewer hands, and those people that don't have wealth at all are forced to live in not just poverty, but in absolute dehumanized poverty. And that's happening more and more and more around the world and getting closer and closer and closer to this environment here. And the argument is that one of the arguments he's putting forward in the book is that it's morally inconceivable why people think that this makes sense for capitalism. And the moral argument he's putting forward, not the economic argument and not the political argument, the moral argument he's putting forward is that it actually goes against humanity to not have a middle class. It actually goes against the interests of the whole social, because if you think that the social is based on the famous three examples, reason, sociality, and the rise of the division between church and reason, sociology, and movement. If you think that that is the sort of principles, and this is again the Enlightenment's coming back to claim its day in the sun. If you think that, then you're going to say it's morally reprehensible to have the 1% versus the 99% in the world with these like amazing forms of wealth, not just sort of forms of wealth, amazing forms. And he documents how in the last 7 years this has been the case, how it literally has happened step by step. It's fascinating. But he calls it a moral position, and he doesn't call it a moral position because he's saying you guys that have the money are all bastards. But he's saying that there's something that's just wrong about that. Now, Kant is making a similar argument. He's basically saying that in a society that doesn't produce the conditions around which one can become human, it's morally bankrupt. So he's not suggesting that you must do X, Y, and Z or you're immoral. He's saying that there's a cultural form of morality. There's a social form of morality. And that morality has to happen in the system, the systematizing of how something gets from point A to B. So it makes sense, what he's saying. That makes political sense. But how is he able to get away with that argument? How is it that he doesn't sound like a preacher man? You know, somebody saying, you know, I feel this way because I do. How can he be right and other people wrong?
Is it posing? I didn't. It's a bit unclear to me yet. This, but still, but he's posing the problem of how the subject in society, so the social subject, political subject, is formed and established and can last around the notion of law. In my impression from reading his book. So the whole problem rotates around how the law can hold and not be either a dogma or subjective.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer that he's giving is that the law must be universal. And that's precisely where he's creative and where all the subtleties start. Because how is the law universal?
So how's the universal stroke objective?
Objective.
Right? By universal means it must apply in every case. And you have to go get
Yes.
thingy. Matthias, sorry.
I have his phone number in case you need to.
Yeah. Pardon me. I'm so sorry about this. It's like, how insane is our lives? Matthias. Take my phone
Yes.
and call your phone.
Uh,
Leave your phone here.
I
Okay?
don't remember my number. Sorry.
Your number's in my phone,
Yeah. Okay.
under J. Okay. Because it's a California number, so you can call. Thank you, Jakob.
No worries.
There's no floor. Anyway, okay. So where we're brought to at the moment is that the thing about something being universal, what's important about it is that it carries with it a moral imperative. So here's where the Kantian move becomes really important for you to grasp. It's a very famous thing that is talked about, you'll find it in the literature a lot. It's called, how do they actually call it? It's when, it's a phrase that goes something like, task becomes your duty, and duty makes you free. Now this has of course been translated like, I think there's actually in some of the prisons in the US, this is written above some of the prisons. In Auschwitz it's written?
No,
I know.
Arbeit macht frei.
Great. Anyway, well, it's also in prisons in Virginia, so it's a well-known prison comment. So obviously, anyone can take this and can use it to different purposes. But the idea is that the task is to help create the systematizing of something that will become universal. Its universality, therefore, so your task or your duty is on this earth to create something that creates the movement of the systematizing of universalities that create the human. That create not just any old human, but a very specific thing called a human. The human, so we're not talking about post-humanism, we're not talking about, any of this post stuff. We're talking about this thing called the human. Sorry, for those of you that are into the post at the moment. So the human is that which has reason, that which moves, and that which is social, basically. And that any society that doesn't allow that to happen for each person is considered immoral in some way. Now, that means that if the society is not like that, one must work to have it become like that. And how do you have it become like that? Where you walk around going, hello, like some of the Jehovah's Witnesses on it, let me show you the Bible here, let me explain to you where everything, what are you gonna do? Stand on corners, hand out leaflets? I mean, how are you literally gonna do this? So that just bracket that. Don't ask that question yet. So the second part of this is that It's the relationship between is and ought. Is to be, ought to be. When is moves from that which stands before you as the practical, as the existing, becomes what ought to be, this is the realm, this is the Kantian move, where he's taking the ought and he's putting it into the is. He's taking the ought and he's putting the is, and Marx actually follows this argument by saying that that ought becomes part of the is, can only stick, can only become part of the is, if the way in which you grab that ought is based on necessity and not on frivolity. And that, of course, launched a whole nother argument. You know, what's wrong with frivolity? You know, you know, like, you know, if you can't dance, it's not my revolution, and all the rest of that kind of thing. So the point is that if a move is made where it's not going to stick, then probably it's not going to stick. It's certainly not going to stick if you tell it stick. It's not going to stick. It can only stick if the conditions exist for it to be stuck. That is an old Marxist saying. If the conditions are not ripe in the environment, then you could be standing on your horse, you could be like running around naked, you could be throwing yourself off bridges, it would do nothing. But if you can form a critical mass, that will do something. Critical theory is born, the critical theorist move is born from that. How do you create that critical mass so that it, quote, matters? So it creates the matter around which it sticks, around which the ought sticks to the is. It's a tough one. So, let's, yes.
Is there on paragraph 4
Oh, the fundamentals.
yes, in 413 and
Sorry, what?
4413 and going down from
4413. Oh.
my edition is page 24.
I don't understand. Your edition is page 24.
Yes, but then there are
What's the title of the chapter?
well, it's the second long one.
Is it the
Section
second
2.
part? Section 2.
Section 2, 4, column 413. But it, at the
Oh, I see, right, okay. Section 2, 413.
413.
So in my book, that is going to be on 443, you say? Did you say 443?
413.
441 to 443?
No, 4 column 413.
It's just called 413.
413.
413.
I can't find it. What is the title
It's
of?
imperatives in general.
What is that?
Is that it? Is it?
Yes, everything in nature works in accordance with laws is the first line of the paragraph.
Yes, it's chapter 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth section in Kant. So it's 77 on this one. On this.
What page is it in the Dropbox?
62, great.
If you've got that one, to do the conversion in the Dropbox. In the Cambridge translation, it's page 62 on the
Okay, but it's chapter 2, passage from popular moral philosophy to the metaphysics of moral, right? Okay, and it's page, what was
And
that?
then you've got the useful examples as a subheading. Then you've got popular philosophy, review
Right.
of conclusions, and its imperatives in general.
All right, okay.
Somewhere in there. But
So in this version,
So there is a
in the
paragraph.
HJ patent, it's page 80, paragraph 37, or Kantian page 413, page 413.
Sounds like.
Okay, we're here.
What was it?
Okay, can you read out what you were going to read?
Well, I'm trying to mention why I will return to these and then read it. You were speaking about the difference of the ought and the is,
Right.
and now Kant brings them together, and that's where that's the interesting part of the move makes.
Right.
Because
He doesn't bring them together, he brings the ought into the is.
Not
And
the
that-
is into the ought.
No, he brings the ought into the is. Why is that? There's two reasons for that.
Is the noumenal?
Don't go there. Just what is the is in very practical terms?
The critique of reason, everything that's done in the theoretical work is what is in the critique, tells what is nature, physics, the world.
Okay.
And the practical is the ought, is the critique of practical reason.
Yeah, also because
Okay, but
if you take a pure reason
in
as
lay
nature,
sense, what is?
True. The present.
The present.
Now.
It's
yeah.
now. And if you're doing something in the here and now, and you're political, you're artistic, you want to get things going, you're not going to wait till tomorrow. The ought is future. I really
But
think
is
that
it
everyone
not
must
making
take
the
language courses.
difference here?
The ought is the subjunctive, isn't it, as well? It's,
The ought is also the subjunctive. Yes, that's a brilliant point. And
But
how,
it makes a difference between, because Mark mentioned the pure reason versus practical reason. The is, which word to use, is objective as is a law of nature. There is no decision attached to the is.
right.
While there is decision attached to the ought. And because it says it earlier that what the laws of morals ought to be followed, but very often they aren't.
Be careful with that. No, I think that that's not quite accurate because the is, while there are no decisions as such in the sense that you're not rationally thinking, I'm going from point A to B, and that's now my decision, that doesn't mean decisions are not taken in the is. And decisions are always taken in the is when it's linked to an ought.
Well, then I'll read this paragraph and I'll say what.
Can I just answer that quickly
Yeah,
before you
sure.
read that? Because in Kant there's a teleology to what is, and for Kant he's already made the decision that what everything in the world in its end and aim and goal is kind of the final goal is on the top of the tree is human reason. So animals are there to be eaten by us. So
Yeah, they do.
that so
Western concerning technologies
yeah,
here.
but that's already a decision on his part, I would say, to view the world in that way, and it is just a reflective thought in Kantian. It is a reflection in the same way as art is a reflective understanding in Kant. It's not determinative, it's something that he has kind of decided that this is a way to look at the world, and it's productive and it's useful to look at it that way.
But then,
Okay.
because
Well, why don't you just read what you're going to read then?
okay, so the paragraph starts with everything in nature works in accordance with laws.
Okay, so can you just name the title of the group, just for the web?
But my edition doesn't have titles.
Imperatives in general. Okay, go on.
Everything in nature works in accordance with laws. Only a rational being has the capacity to act in accordance with the representation of laws. That is, in accordance with principles or as will. Since reason is required for the derivation of action from laws, the will is nothing other than practical reason. If reason infallibly determines the will, the action of such a being that are cognized as objectively necessary are also subjectively necessary. That is, the will is a capacity to choose only that which reason, independently of inclination, cognizes as practically necessary, that is, as good.
And how do you translate that?
Well, it's a very strange movement because here, what reason cognizes as necessary, the is, the will chooses. And I was struck at the similarity of Leibniz's choice. Now, God chooses what is rational, thanks to his infinite grace.
But how is it chosen? It's not chosen via decision.
Well, this is what
This is
I
the
am
key here.
unclear about. I'm not clear about because
Because
it
of
is-
that is ethic, because of desire, or be tempted.
It's close to the question of desire. It's not that one has no capacity to, you have some sort of wild bronco inside you, this will, must, take it forward, must go do something. It's not that form, but the will doesn't have to have an intellectual rationale in order to go forward. You don't have to be thinking every 5 seconds, must do this, I must do this, I must do this. However, if you are thinking, I must do this, you can activate the will to move into the kind of pockets that the will needs to push you into in order to do whatever you need to do. So the will is a force that itself is not necessarily rational, but is alive, or is live. Maybe alive is wrong. It's a live wire. It's like electrical in that sense. How would you?
Yeah, but there are
Wait.
number of
How would you characterize desire? Like, in relationship to this thing called the will, what would be a way that you might be able to?
A movement. It's where something's seen as separated, and it's the desire to bring together.
If I pick up this phone,
I don't really like the word energy.
right, but if I pick up this phone, oops, that's a movement. I've now separated it from the table, but I would not say I desire this phone. Sorry, I'm not desiring this phone. So it's not just movement, energy. What is implied by the word desire?
Value.
Something more.
Attraction.
Attraction.
Yeah.
Sexual.
Hello.
You found him.
Yes, we found.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello. Hey, sit down.
Oh, and let me just phones exchange.
Oh yeah, we're just going on about your phone.
That's fine. You have a special chair even here.
That's right.
Joe Lewis. Who's Joe Lewis? Wyatt. I have birthday. Anyway.
Good to see you. Hi. Okay, sit down. Just
Yeah, yeah.
finishing off Kant.
Oh, good.
Okay, so where were we on this last very bit?
No, I'm gonna go here.
Desire.
So, what's interesting about desire is attraction. What about attraction?
He doesn't want any inclination in it. He wants the unconditioned.
Yes, that's right.
So this is, so it's kind of like he wants this a pureness. That's why it's really good about having cake and.
That's why
well, we discussed Kant's unconditioned, but it's the distinction between or I think the more key one is the autonomy of the will versus the heteronomy of the wills.
And what is that?
Well, the autonomy is so it takes you back to that internal and external thing earlier, where like really a heteronomy is like systems where there's something external governing you, so you're not free. Whereas with autonomy, you're like the self-governor. There's a self-governing going on. So even though there's this unconditioned command, you're the lawgiver of it. So you're playing your part in that, and so in that sense, you've got free will.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, but
he says that it's not to do with like all your sort of. Well, he just takes out all the sort of. He sort of cleanses it of like your bodily economy.
So then what is the advantage of calling it, from the Kantian perspective, what's the advantage of calling it a metaphysics of moral? Like why go there? Why go to the moral plane?
Because the problem is to establish what gives force to the law. What makes the law a law and not just a local rule.
Right, okay, well, but, yeah, okay, yes.
Therefore,
He's identifying that as freedom. Anything other isn't Isn't
moral,
freedom.
isn't moral, is that what you're saying? So
Mm.
morality for Kant in this metaphysics of moral, fundamentals, is suggesting that freedom is a moral requirement of the social. Does everybody agree with that?
As a kind of selfless humanitarian.
It's not selfless, I mean, Kant definitely has selves in there.
But it's not the self isn't prioritized over the other.
The self isn't homogenized into the other. It's a different way of putting it.
There is also something about this construction of the law, which or universality of the law, which I can't yet solve. When if the principle of the law, or principle according to which we judge something to be a law, is that it is universal, or it could be applied in every instance, I think that he's not saying the same as one would say, if everybody would behave like that, that's a comment one makes.
Okay, that's the fallacy of the notion of moral.
Exactly, but that's not what Kant is saying.
Okay, so what is Kant saying then? Okay.
Because the problem is exactly where we started, that he manages to, but he claims, and I accept the claim, but I don't understand yet how he's getting there, that the will wants the law, and in that there is freedom. So in the obedience to the law, there is the freedom of the individual.
Okay. But the catch is where? Where's the catch located in that?
Well, apparently, if you obey, it seems to fly in the face of freedom. There is something I can't understand.
I think it's in the choosing.
In the choosing
Is
of
where
what? What are you choosing? Choosing to obey.
This is this bit where
Choosing your slavery,
it's
yeah.
like the thing he says. Hence, the principle of autonomy is never to choose except in such a way that in the same volition the maxims of your choice are also present as universal law. He sort of has that sentence several times in slightly different variations, but that's that key sentence.
That's the categorical imperative.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yes, that is the categorical
In its
imperative.
variations as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Can you read that aloud again?
Hence, the principle.
Wait, sorry, what page is that on?
This is on page 108 in the one that's on the Dropbox. It's the section which begins with the heading Autonomy of the Will as the Supreme Principle.
Does anybody know where that is?
The
autonomy. Which
page.
translation do you have?
It's the Dropbox one, which has got 108 here, actually on the top page.
Oh yeah, it is 108. Okay, here.
Keep it memorized.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
So yes, where it says it's the property.
So say it louder.
Well, where it says autonomy of the will is the property the will has.
Wait, can everybody find it? Nobody finds it. It's on Dropbox 108. It's section, for those of you that have the German translations, it is either 88, section 88, or it's 441. Okay.
Well, wait, because I've noted it says autonomy of the will is the property the will has of being a law to itself, independently of every property belonging to the objects of volition. And then there's that sentence.
So autonomy of the will is the property the will has of being a law to itself. So here you might see the links to the monology argument. Okay, anyway, the autonomy of the will is the property of the will has of being a law unto itself independently of every property belonging to the objects of volition. Okay, hence the principle of autonomy is
never to choose except in such a way that in the same volition the maxims of your choice are also present as universal law.
So for every action you choose, it's like some variation of a fractal then. You can do the small version of the fractal or the large version of the fractal. It's still the fractal as long as it's part of the universe, because it becomes part of the universal no matter where its enactment is, small or large.
But yet this is a projection to infinity, which is not about quantity.
Right, okay, and so what's it about then? We're almost there. Likely too, because they have to.
Why? Sorry, can I ask a question? Why infinity?
Because if every instance that one could conceive of the behavior I'm choosing should be viable, should be acceptable, then it's a projection to infinity. That's the way I understand the universality.
But universality is not just that it projects in time, it also projects anywhere.
Anywhere, anytime, for anyone.
Yeah, okay. Right.
But because that any is not defined, I see it as a projection to infinity.
Yeah.
As in, the transcendental is a projection to infinity of what would have been taken as transcendent earlier.
Okay, good. So the notion of the transcendental in Kant, which projects to infinity, how does that then differ from the notion of a groundless ground in a rhizomatic logic? Then what's the difference? If one can be sort of going to infinity, the world can go till it ends up, if the end of the world is simply the end of the world, as you keep getting there, it keeps moving away, and that's that form of the transcendent materiality of the ground, then how does that differ from, let's say, the Braverman version? Or,
Because that's a linear logic, isn't it?
well, no, it's an infinite logic, so it's expanding, and it's not linear in that sense, it's expanding. So the edge of the universe, so let's say that this whole thing is the universe, and then it keeps expanding, but the way it expands, it never gets beyond itself. So the edge of the universe is always wherever that edge is, and it just can keep expanding. It's not really linear, so if you had it like this,
It's more curved.
yeah, it could be, or like a round thing. It would just expand forever. So the critique of that, so what would be Einsteinians, the Einstein, or even Hegel, but what would be the critique?
It's
about-
it's a bad infinity. Infinity should be a circle. And Hegel, that's his critique of Kant, that this idea that infinity just goes on. And really, it's just a circle. It's the same thing come again.
Okay, so what's Einstein's critique of that, though?
Nietzsche's is the general return.
I want Einstein's critique. You're right, Mark. But what is the critique of this ever-expanding scenario?
Why would we call it a critique of the
Right. Right, so if the universe is not always expanding to infinity, what else is it doing?
But we collapse or stop.
Change is
And what else exists other than the infinite expansion of the universe?
time.
Okay, let me start again. Let me put it slightly differently. What other type of transcendental ground, or let's say groundless ground, exists other than the one that's based on this infinite exponential movement? Okay, or is there another one that exists?
Yeah, that's
Excuse me.
Sorry.
I did say that.
You did say that. Okay, we're going to accept Sophie's remark. Okay, and what's the advantage of that? When time and space start shape-shifting as well, because space no longer becomes space, but becomes speed, and time becomes some other thing, curved. So what's the advantage? What do we gain? What's useful about that? Let's say. Nothing. Mental confusion. If you have the expanding blob, you will, by deduction, eventually fall into the notion of meaning that is connected to a form of an identity. You have to be setting up some form of a boundary, whether or not it's an edged boundary or a boundary that is simply expanding to it, that whatever its expansion is its edge. And that will always create some form of identity meaning. But if you have a situation where time is multiple and space, and it has, in fact, time doesn't necessarily exist, as in the Einsteinian move, which is the time is speed or time is curved, or whatever the story is, then a different form of meaning gets established. It's not based on an identity move.
Yeah, there's the relation we saw in Heidegger, but here it's not as simple as that, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's not, as simple as just the expanding thing.
Yeah, or it's not as simple as the relational identity built in Heidegger of Durance.
No, I agree. No, it's a different form of identity that's going on, but it still exists, so that you still have a situation where you have the individual and the social, in some kind of relation that's happening. Yes.
I mean, in Kant's second maxim of the classical imperative talks about how every action is an end rather than a means to an end. So there's no, so everything is an end. It's a point in time, space, whatever, and at the moment after is another point, and there's no means to end. There's no deferral of that point. And like, say, if the universe was to expand into a space, that would be sort of a means to an end. So it would expand. Its means would be to expand into that space where it would end. But if it's just all built on ends, it's always expanding into. Well, it's just always expanding. It's not expanding
Right.
into an end
Right.
at any point.
And what happens then?
When?
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 Great, nice answer. Yeah.
So it's a game of singularities.
It's a game of singularities. Good. Can you explain how you got there?
What? From what Dane just said.
From Dane. Dane, can you explain how Mattia got there?
Well,
Because if every step is an end but in the mean, then it does not, it's not in function of something else, nor the product of something else, but it's self-standing.
in the end, it's discontinuous logic, so points, it's not a single straight line of infinite points, it's discrete.
Okay, and you're drawing that from the second axiom.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, good. Not bad. Not bad. Are you okay to end on this? Because we need to have a 5-minute gear shift, so that Mattia can wash your brains out and have a little break. Is that okay? So.